So let me talk to you about what medicines do. Let me show you. Here's a picture. This is a picture of depression. So one of the things that I try to point out specifically is that the brain is extremely complex. Let me just tell you, there's 300 billion brain cells. No, 300 million brain cells in one human brain. And they there's a gap between every cell, so no two cells touch. Tom Brown is a researcher down at, or was a researcher down at Yale and ran the ADHD Center. And he's written several books. His book on ADHD is probably one of the very best. And he used to use an illustration before the World Trade Towers came down, but he used an illustration that can tell you about the cells in a human brain. Picture, take the 110 stories, the World Trade Tower, the old World Trade Tower, and take a 10-inch TV, or a TV screen, TVs or TV, and line them all up, the old standard TVs, and stack them one on top of another and all around the building and line them all up 110 stories. I think he was talking about a 17-inch TV at that time. Now, you know on the screen how a picture is made up of pixels, those little dots?
Right.
Count up all the pixels on all those TV screens, 110 stories, and that's the number of cells in a human brain weighing 13 pounds. Amazing, an amazing organ. And so then you take this picture here, and how this works. There's an electrical charge that comes through a nerve, and it stimulates the release of these little star-like things of the neurotransmitters. This picture has serotonin. And so it releases the serotonin. The serotonin has to then go to the other cell and attach itself. And that's how an electrical charge goes through. One thought comes through that way. Now, if you don't have enough serotonin in the gap here, that's where we start seeing depression. And so when we use medicines for depression that are called SSRIs, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, what that is these neurotransmitters go here, but then they have to be brought back in to be ready for the next impulse, the next nerve transmission. And what SSRIs do, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, it blocks the reuptake and it allows the serotonin to stay in here and normalize the cell. Now, ADHD, we have dopamine and norepinephrine. Same deal. Electrical charge comes through, stimulates. This is the norepinephrine. This is the dopamine. These little transmitters come through here. They have to attach. And when we use stimulant medicine, it stimulates the release and it blocks the reuptake. And it all has to do with these transporter mechanisms. And that's really the key area here. So when we use any of these medications, let's just look at, for instance, the amphetamine base. Can you see those?
Yes.
Okay. So out there, so we have, this is a liquid one up here called Dianavil, but then we have the other ones, Vyvanse, Adderall, and these are so on the top part, these are the long-acting medications. The next group are the short-acting medications. And then you see the group of non-stimulants. And the non-stimulants we do use, but the problem is they're very, they have to be taken every single day. And the one thing about stimulant medicine, that's the beauty, is you take it, an hour later, you see the effect. It's gone by that afternoon. There's no carryover. So some kids that where it's just really an academic issue, not a behavioral issue, these are the ones you never see, Jason.
Right. I was just thinking that.
You don't get those.
Right.
But these are the kids that take their medication, and they're the ones who were down at a D, and now all of a sudden they're up to an A. And they're what's changed is their work efficiency. So they're able to be more efficient and organized and get the work done. It's not, so what I try to stress most importantly, and that's why I give famous people, because I say most people with ADHD are very bright and highly creative. They just can't, as opposed to the kid with dyslexia, they can't sit still long enough just to get the work done. And they hear that all the time. If you would just sit still, do your work, you'd be done. And then you can go out and play. But so their efficiency changes with the use of medication, and they get it done, and they do it really well and in an organized fashion. But those kids that are strictly academic, and there's not that many of them, they are off medication on weekends, summers, holidays. And I do encourage families to take breaks, because you don't know, when do you stop medicine? Well, when you don't need it anymore. How are you going to know unless you stop periodically and take it and check it out?
You talk about efficiency, and I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with clients about, when they take the proper medication and it's working for them, they are so productive. They are not laying on the couch. It doesn't feel like they go 8 hours without doing anything. They are just so much more active, and then their emotions tend to it's like a domino effect from what I see. It's just, they're emotional, which I wanted to get into too, about the motion regulation part. But I do see such an increase in drive when they do feel more productive and more active in that.
Motivated.
Absolutely.
Yeah. To do the stuff that they don't want to do, because they know they have to do it. And you know what? There's a sense of pride. So that it isn't just for the teacher, it's for themselves. And that little subtlety carries over long-term in their life, because they don't feel like the failure or the black sheep in the family, which is a challenge for families. So, and then on the other flip side of that is the Ritalin bases. These are all the Ritalin base. So there's two. So this goes back to the encephalitis. There was an encephalitis plague that occurred 70 years ago or something, and Bradley Hospital in Rhode Island was the main testing area for stimulant medications for post-encephalitis patients. And they found that after they had this encephalitis, they had a hard time focusing and paying attention, and they started using the stimulant medications then. And, they're safer to use than even antibiotics like amoxicillin for an ear infection, where people have allergic reactions. I've never seen an allergic reaction to any of these medications ever.
So they're actually safer.
They're very safe. Yes, they're very safe. And the problem is that one of the things is they take away your appetite for the most of them. And so you have to monitor weight, height, and blood pressure. And those are the three parameters. And I always seek families back every 3 months when they're on medications and doing it. And now that I'm doing telemedicine for the next, I guess, couple of months, we do it by telemedicine, and I have families try to weigh them, but it's really hard.
Those parents that are concerned about their kids losing weight or being underweight, they really do get concerned about the physical their child's physical health. What strategies do you give? What tips do you give to parents to help that?
Well, it's very variable, but so to me, the biggest thing is they've got to eat a big breakfast, and I stress this, and I said, and make sure you have ample time to be able to give a big breakfast, and those kids that can't swallow a pill, I have them take it with ice cream in the morning, and I used to tell kids about BB Dairy. Remember those days when we had a BB Dairy in this area, and they used to have the eye opener was there on the menu for breakfast, and it was orange juice with a scoop of vanilla ice cream. Well, so I say pick out your favorite ice cream, and you have one scoop of ice cream for breakfast. Well, that usually wins them over. But they have to eat breakfast and then take their medication. They may not eat much for lunch, but then come dinner, they usually are eating. And those kids that get hungry later on, I've often said, make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and put it by the side of the bed. And if they wake up during the night, let them have that. Then there are all these other supplements like Carnation Instant Breakfast, as a shake in the morning. They can do that, and again add ice cream to it, because some of these Pediatrics and these different things are not very palatable, but they can boost them up and fix them up so that they give them extra calories and taste good during the day. And even if you make one a day and drink it throughout the day, then that works pretty well.
Can you talk to a little bit about ADHD and sleep? I can't tell you how many times I talk about the sleep disturbances, waking up,
Yeah. Sleep well, that's a whole nother subject, but sleep disturbance is very common in ADHD, just as an entity in itself. So, and it's not necessarily caused by the medication. However, if you give your medication too late, because it is a stimulant, it can affect sleep. And one of the things, so this has been looked at very extensively about sleep and ADHD, and most recently I listened to a sleep specialist talking about now a newer form of melatonin. So melatonin is a natural substance that's produced in what we call the pineal gland, right here in the fore part of the brain, and that helps us regulate melatonin, which is what is naturally in our body to help us with sleep. Teens notoriously have what we call sleep initiation disorder problems, where they have a hard time initiating sleep, but once they're asleep, they do pretty well. But kids with ADHD just can't turn it off. They get into bed, their mind's racing. They cannot settle down. I call those the curtain calls. Those are the ones they're up and down. I can't sleep, and then go to bed. I can't sleep. They're back and forth and running, and you're going nuts. So, and those have lots of curtain calls. But so I do recommend the use of melatonin because it's very safe in children, and it's been used extensively. And there are many, many preparations. Most of them are short acting. General Nutrition, GNC, has a chewable 1 milligram, which they dissolve under your tongue, and they're kind of orange flavored, and the kids like those, and they often will work at a very low dose, like 1 milligram. And then there is another company called Olly, Olly, and they have a big section in CVS, and it's a chewable that has melatonin, but it also has other homeopathic kind of things like passion flower that also has been shown to help with sleep. And then just regular melatonin. But this researcher talked about now an extended release form of melatonin that comes as 5 milligrams and 10 milligrams, and it mimics the sleep cycle. So it oftentimes kids will initiate sleep, but then they awaken during the night. This helps maintain a steady sleep and has worked quite well. all of these have to be taken at least an hour to 90 minutes before you want a child to go to bed, because they take a while to kick in and work. But those do help. The more severe kids, there are other medications, one called Clonidine that I use that absolutely works to help turn off the chatter so that they can go to sleep and initiate sleep as well. But it's very, very, very common. And we know it's very common in teens. And that's why, the whole argument about starting high school later, because the kids sleep in later, and have the elementary school kids go first to school because they're the ones up at 5 or 6. Yeah. But that doesn't work because of sports and clubs and stuff like that. So
yeah, and I think that also bleeds into the habits. So we talk about habits, and
oh, definitely.
Just if habits are really encouraged and enforced at an early age, I think people are more apt to have good habits. But I see, and I'm sure you do too, just a lot of teens and even adults that, they'll stay up till 3-4 o'clock, have difficulty falling.
They got to turn off all the stimulating, the phone, get rid of the phones. And one thing that's a huge argument is like kids having TVs in their room, and the computer screens, they all have to be shut down and gone. So and that's just a constant battle. As I always say, I'm glad my kids are older and I don't have to be dealing with all this.
You're past that. Yeah.
It is. It's very hard. Yeah. Parenting is a defensive art.
Yeah. I'd like to move in a direction of, so Barkley, one of his executive functions that he talks about is emotion regulation.
Yeah.
And so there's this term, rejection sensitive dysphoria, otherwise known as RSD. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah. So as a matter of fact, I have the article. My original article was there's a magazine called Attitude.
Yes.
And it's that's my favorite magazine for ADD, and I highly recommend it for families. And they ran an article, and this goes back. This was quite a few, maybe 2 years ago. And William Dodson, Dodson, was the person who really wrote about it. He has a center in Colorado outside of Denver, and this rejection sensitive dysphoria is really, and it seems to be highly associated with ADHD. And it's one that's very, very prevalent, and where kids overly react to criticism, and they just get into almost a rage. And so it is something that is seen. Now, one of the things, interestingly, is Dr. Dodson does not feel that it's amenable to talk therapy, and he recommended medications. And one of the medicines is the medicine I just mentioned to you about sleep, Clonidine. These are called alpha adrenergic agents. And but indeed, it's one that families should be aware of, because they say, I don't know, it gets into such a mood, right. Like, oh my God, and I don't know what to do. And so it really is a problem long term. These are the problems. This turns into a situation where they end up becoming people pleasers. It affects your self-esteem, because then you become unsure of how to react because you're afraid of that responsiveness. And then after a while you start looking and thinking, well, how can I be better to that particular person? And you begin losing yourself. You don't know who you really are. And and it's pretty interesting thing that is very recently brought up in terms of the ADHD community.
Yeah, there's such a negative mental filter. So on my end, that's what I find. So, when I use a therapeutic approach, and usually CBT is one of the more common ones that I'll use with this in terms of, you know, accessing earlier experiences when there was exclusion or they were the last one picked, or a friend just stopped being friends with them, and then there's that internal dialogue. I'm not good enough. I'm a loser. There's a lot wrong with me. Then there's just that real negative filter that gets developed really early on that really carries through, and it's almost like we're trying to reprogram a person's mind. I call it old script, new script, where that old script can still run over and over.
Oh, it's very hard to get rid of that old script too.
Yes. I wanted to ask you too about the American Academy of Pediatrics, and there are several programs there. I'm not sure how many the public knows about these. So that we have Bright Futures, Connected Kids, Red Book Online. Can you speak a little bit to those?
Sure. So the American Academy of Pediatrics is an organization that tries to help pediatricians guide families through their children's lifetimes. And so Red Book is a Red Book. Duh.
Simple and to the point.
Simple and to the point. It's a small book, but it's all about the infectious diseases. So it's our go-to book that comes out each year, and it's just updated about basically infectious diseases and vaccines and things like that. Bright Futures that is also gives us a lot of the different checklists and questionnaires and help in terms of development. So when kids come into the office, now we do, every time kids come in, we do a whole screening of where they are developmentally. And then if there's some red flags that come up that are just not quite, that are somewhat off, for instance, like pointing at age 1 is a red flag for autism if they don't point to things. And that's about reciprocity, about getting your attention to things. Well, then, as a matter of fact, one of the psychologists at University of Connecticut, Deborah Fein, Fein, is the one who came out with the MCHAT, which is what we use at 18 months and 2 years each time at their visits to look at possibilities for autism. And then there are, through that same program, there is the pediatric symptom checklist, and that we do for kids up to age 12, where they have a way to respond to different questions, and it kind of helps us guide us towards what are different possibilities in terms of their development. One thing that you recently came out because of the pandemic is the outrageous amount of anxiety that are being seen in pediatric patients, and the PSC-17, which is what we use, brings those issues out that maybe would not have been discussed if we hadn't asked these questions. 12 on, we do a depression screening and are always asking about, and there's then that's a screening of 9 questions, and the 9th question is, do you think you would rather be dead or harm yourself? And so those are things, again, that steer us, and these are guides that the American Academy of Pediatrics is trying to help us do in a correct way.
So Dr. Blefeld, is there other initiatives or topics that you think is important for people to know about, to be aware of?
The main thing that I would say is that, um, even our health department here in Connecticut helps. There's a lot of different resources out there for assistance, one in our training, as well as for resources that are finally beginning in this area. There has been a lot of more initiatives that are coming out, and people are seeking out southeastern Connecticut. You can see what's happened with Hartford Healthcare, where they're opening up all over the place. There are many. Yale's moved now into Lawrence and Memorial, and so we're seeing more servicing. So, for instance, what used to be, we used to call Yale the Mecca, and now we're getting pediatric services at Lawrence and Memorial, and we're getting pediatric services in Old Saybrook, so that we have greater access to more servicing for our patients in the local area. As a matter of fact, I was seeing a patient yesterday, and when we finish, a very unusual situation with this particular child, I feel kind of out of my league, and I need to speak to a neurologist. And we have this thing called Y-axis. I can call Yale in 3 minutes. I'll have a neurologist available to talk to review cases and hopefully get some help for this family. So we have a lot of good servicing. And mental health. The only thing about mental health is we don't have enough pediatric child psychiatrists. It's very, very hard. One thing that happened after Sandy Hook was that the Department of Health created what's called the mental health access line, and I can call this line, and they have different psychiatrists between Yale and Connecticut Children's that answer, and I can review things with them. And they won't see the patient, but they will discuss cases with me.
We are so taxed as a medical mental health system.
Oh yeah.
Therapists are just overwhelmed. There's people's wait time is weeks, and for some even 6 months.
Right.
There's just not enough and enough quality professionals to really help this crisis right now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Dr. Blefeld, I want to thank you so much. I appreciate you. I am so grateful for you. I know that obviously from personal and professional experiences how much you mean to the community over all these years. I've had constant feedback about who you are just as a person, not just your professional abilities, but who you are as a person. You really do care. So,
well, thank you. That's always wonderful to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I hope we can have further conversations and get some really good information and continue the conversations.
Good. Yeah. Good. No, this has been very, very good for me too. It's enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you again, Dr. Blefeld, for meeting with me and sharing this incredibly valuable information. Please share your comments and questions below, and I hope to have Dr. Blefeld back on in the future to help with further mental health initiatives. Thank you for watching, and as always, be where you are, be resilient.